Let's see if we can get us done in an hour. Oh, empirical observations would say we will not get this podcast done in under an hour, but we shall see. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Dre Crazy Hair Alvarez, and with me as always is my producer, voice of God, and man of many hats, Brian, to nickname Foster. How's it going, Brian?
Oh, I like the nickname that you picked up today. That's a good one.
Yeah,
we'll see. We'll go for about an hour, Dre. Let's see how that goes.
See, so basically what happened for those of you that were just listening to what we did, this is, I think one of my favorite shows is called Psych. And one of the things they joke about is that they'll have the recap, they'll have the flashback to the scene that just happened, or a character re-explains something that just happened. So for those of you that were just listening, right before the show started, I was kind of talking to Brian about, how many, how over we were going to go, because the last couple of shows have gone about an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's true.
I decided to just keep going with it. All right. So anyway, the good news is this week's show is kind of a filler episode for those of you like Dragon Ball Z fans. A lot of what we have to discuss, in my opinion, and I think Brian's as well, you weren't as enthused pre-show, Brian, is a lot of stuff we said like the last 2 weeks. And so for those of you that were fans of Dragon Ball Z, there would be episodes where they would have a discussion about how they were going to fight the villain. You're like, that is a good episode. And in the next episode, they'd do it again after they did a last week on Dragon Ball Z. And you're kind of like, but to be fair, that's where we are. By the way, I
think Donovan Mitchell is going to score over 9,000 points in his next game, Dre. How about that?
So funny how trivial that became as the show went on, but let's get off of Dragon Ball Z. For Dragon Ball Z fans, that was the Dragon Ball Z section. All right. First, we got to give a shout out to our friend of the show, Dave Barry, and his weekly Forbes column. Well, I guess he is actually getting big enough at Forbes to merit the giant freaking ads coming up before going there. I don't remember that always being the case, but he has been really hitting on all cylinders lately. A post he recently put up over at Forbes is called... it goes, yes, fans of the Warriors, Stephen Curry's injury might be a crisis. And I think I don't recall if the article changed, the title changed, but there's something about time to panic for Warriors fans, Brian. And you said you weren't really that interested in this piece, but let's talk about it. So all Dave Barry basically went over is said, Steph Curry is the best player on the Warriors, and our numbers back this up this season. Obviously, Steph Curry versus Kevin Durant is a very 1A thing, but at least this season, Steph Curry has been the best player on the Warriors. Now, actually, something I'm interested in, Brian, because I was mentioning this stat earlier in the season. According to Steve Kerr, it is unlikely that Stephen Curry will be back before the playoffs.
Yeah, so there's kind of a range to his injury, his latest knee injury from when JaVale McGee fell on his knee. Could be a few weeks, could be more. And Curry himself is not ruling anything out, but Steve Kerr has said basically he doesn't think he should play in the first round. If you look at recent players who've had this injury in the NBA, grade 2 MCL sprain specifically, he probably is going to miss the first round. And if Steve Kerr says it, then there you go. So it remains to be seen is the real answer.
What I would also say, too, and this kind of happened in the crazy season that Steph Curry got injured on some sweat and didn't make it back full strength for the playoffs, and they lost in the finals, is you probably don't need Stephen Curry except against the Rockets, yeah. I would argue. Well, another team we'll discuss, they're our next subject. But here's the I'll give you a silver lining, Brian. Because of this injury that has knocked him out. Now, admittedly, we're going to have to cut the bar a little lower than I would like. Steph Curry is going to be the first player in NBA history to attempt at least 15 shots a game while shooting above 67% true shooting percentage. Admittedly, he just breaks it with 1,600 minutes this season. So, I would have loved if he'd gotten 2,000 minutes in the season, but still, this is the first time in NBA history that's happened. We should also know...
Warriors Twitter is angry about this, by the way, Dre. They are nerdy enough to care.
They're angry that he's not going to get the 2,000.
That he's going to come short, yeah, by a little bit.
Well, I mean, he still gets the record. That's all I'm saying.
But not that even number, though. I don't care at all, personally.
Being a smartass. But yeah, I mean, let's get one more just stat up that I'm going to grab really quick, depending on how fast Basketball Reference player, what you call. Ooh, I got this. I messed this up, Brian. How I messed this up horribly because I was going to ask for more than 200 3-point. Here's what I did, Brian. I was trying to ask for over 200 3-pointers, and I asked for over 200 just shots. And I don't know if you'll believe this. There have been many, many players in the history of the NBA that have taken over 200 shots in a season. There have only been 72 times in NBA history that a player has made 200 shots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Steph Curry is 6 of them. So Steph Curry is almost 10% of the 200 3-point shots made club in the NBA. So, I mean, he has that going for him. I mean, it's impressive that in only 50 games, not 500 minutes, in only 50 games of play, Steph Curry has put up a season this good. So,
so this reminds me, Dre, I don't want to sidetrack you too much, but can I get your brief comments here on the Todd Whitehead article about Curry that I put in the email thread but not in the script accidentally? So he had a lot of different stuff about Curry, and a lot of it's just like, I like him more than most of the guys at Nylon Calculus, but it's still just a lot of like fun facts in a lot of those articles, right? But here's the one that got me in that article, which was improvement in teammate true shooting percentage when you're on the court. So this is what I'm asking about. We hate on-off stats because a 5-player lineup has a very small sample size. But if you're looking at all of Curry's minutes on the court with like all of his teammates, that's a bigger sample size, so it's a little more interesting. But I still kind of have a tough time seeing the connection there. Like what the mechanism is.
I remember that, and I actually what I wanted to look at was Donovan Mitchell of all players. There was an argument, but let's see, Ben Taylor. I don't know if I follow him, but. I'll have to read over this. So I want to be fair because I'll put it this way. I am normally, and I feel this is the right method, a little skeptical on a lot of stats, especially ones that are attempting to measure very noisy things. So, I saw an interesting point where someone was saying Pascal Siakam, I think that's how you say his name, on Toronto, that he's not helping his team because the 3-point shots he takes aren't spacing the floor. And I also always get a little weirded out when people try and credit a player with how they help things and kind of ignore that behind like what they're actually doing, if that makes sense. So, for instance, back to Donovan Mitchell, who we will talk some more, I'm assuming, in the show. It's odd to see people saying, well, he's helping his teammates out by taking all those shots, while ignoring the very real impact of his bad shots. And so Steph Curry is another interesting one where I'm kind of going, well, maybe he helps out his teammates, but, I'd look at the first thing first. So I need to look at spacing to see. It does appear that he, according to this metric, that the names on the list don't surprise me, although it might depend on the thing. And it is from pbpstats.com, which is what I like. So I'll put a pin in that. I want to look at it. I want to see what I think about that, because it might be true. And I would be interested to see. I would actually like to start digging into some of these so-called spacing metrics, because I do get interested in players like, for instance, a player that is on this list, although they claim he's hurting his teammates. And so that's a question to me. They're saying Giannis is hurting his teammates, and I'm curious if they're saying it's because of where he takes his shots from or whatever. So I need to look into this more. That was a very long-winded way of saying I don't know. So
and of course assists are all as a part of this too, right? So this chart we're looking at right now, it's got high and low assist guys. So I tend to think you're right that he's looking at this as being spacing more than anything. So yeah, we'll see. So anyway, this is a kind of an interesting article and has great looking charts. Sorry, go ahead, Dre.
Charts. We've discussed that before. All Dave was basically saying is, of course, missing your best player puts you in the playoffs. We've seen that before. And another important note that I'll give, and you were really happy about this, is Dave was looking at opponent strength of schedule, or SRS, which is at Basketball Reference, which is simple. It's called their simple rating system. It's anything but simple. But what it does is it looks at a team's point margin per 100 possessions. So that's how many points we score per 100 possession versus how many points our opponent scores per 100 possession, and then adjusted for strength of schedule. So essentially, what it's kind of trying to give you is like in a 100 possession game, how much would my team beat another team by on a neutral court, because you're adjusting for teammates, right? If I got to play Phoenix 2 extra times than you, my point margin is going to be higher than yours, so let's adjust for that. And all he was noting is that a few years ago when Steph Curry was injured, their first round opponent was Portland, who had a negative SRS. And basically, if you have a close to 0 SRS that's a little negative, you're essentially close to a 41-win team with maybe some favorable matchups over the course of the season. This season, though, there are some damned good teams. And let's I know you're going to beat me to it, Brian, but I'll see if I can catch up. So if we go to Basketball Reference and like at the bottom at the miscellaneous stats, they'll say the SRSs. And I know like Utah's been looking really good. Utah's like a 3. Denver is just going to break my heart with that 1.17 SRS, but still missing the playoffs. So some teams that are in the bottom seats. So the Golden State Warriors, barring a crazy upset, are going to finish with a number 2 seed out west.
And like we said last week, they're publicly conceding it already.
Oh yeah, like Draymond Green was saying that to reporters or whatever. So barring something weird happening, and we're hoping for like Patrick's bet, an article coming up that Utah can go on a hot streak and maybe take that Western Conference seed. But regardless, let's take a look. So let's take a look at these teams. Portland. Actually, yeah, all of these teams are so close. So Portland, Oklahoma City, New Orleans Pelicans, San Antonio Spurs, Utah Jazz, and Minnesota Timberwolves. So if we look at all of these teams, and I'm trying to go to SRS, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a SRS of 2.33. Portland Trailblazers, 2.74. Oklahoma City Thunder, 3.06. San Antonio Spurs, 3.11. Utah Jazz is the real scary one, 3.48. So essentially all of these teams are significantly better. Now the good news is the Golden State Warriors right now, they've lost some ground since that hot start with all the injuries, with the injuries to Clay and Durant and Steph Curry and Draymond Green. Their SRS sets at 7.2, which again, on a neutral court, they'd be expected in a 100-possession game to win by plus 7.2 against an average team. Now, if you here's the rough part. You take Curry off that squad. Now, I'd say Curry is probably worth plus 3, plus 4, points over par, which does actually line up with SRS. That still leaves them at a plus 4 SRS team, but that is darn close to the Utah Jazz. And don't forget, like the Utah Jazz, a fantastic home. Now, it's weird to phrase it this way. They have a fantastic home court advantage. Obviously, Golden State's going to have the home court advantage over the course of the series, but that means they're much more likely to lose games to Utah and Utah. So if Utah can steal a game, this could be interesting.
And specifically what you mean there, Dre, is the elevation, right? Arturo, I think, and other people have looked at Denver and Utah's elevation, and it really is a big home court advantage.
Yeah, those teams tend to have a better. So so that's all we're saying is that like if Golden State lucks into an unfavorable playoff seeding, for instance, against Utah in the first round, and Steph Curry isn't back, we've always kind of noticed about the playoffs. I can't remember if I've talked about this on the show, but it's something that came up. So I was thinking about this. One of the examples we bring up a lot, and I called it like the Marcus Camby cocoon theory or something to that effect, is in 1999. The New York Knicks made the NBA Finals as the number 8 seed, and it essentially was because one of their players who hadn't been that great, Marcus Camby, turned into a star in the playoffs. That's what happened. Also, you can talk to Art Rondeau. That was a crazy season. We've written about it before. But I was thinking about that, and if you consider this, there have really only been, since the advent of the non-bye first-round playoffs, which occurred in 1984, there have only been, I believe, around 40 playoffs that are legit. Like 34, so less than 40. So if you think about that as just like a pure Bayesian statistic, that's better than a 2% chance that a number 8 seed lucks into the finals, if you think about it. And don't forget, before that, a team with a losing record, but it's odd to phrase it this way with a different playoff scheme. The Houston Rockets with a 40-42 record managed to make the NBA Finals. The Houston Rockets, although this one I don't really count because they traded for a star midseason in Clyde Drexler, the number 6 seed, made the NBA Finals. Most NBA Finals, I was looking over this, are like a number 1 versus number 2 seed going at it, right? The Lakers versus the Celtics in the 80s was just two powerhouses doing that over and over again. We're not shocked to see the top 3-seeded Cavaliers repeatedly facing the top 1-seeded Warriors over and over again. but it's really not outside the realm of possibility for a team to luck their way to a finals. And I think one of the things we're misled by, I'll tie this back to Nate Silver too, when he was trying to make like election predictions. There haven't been that many presidential elections, right? They happen every 4 years. We've only been around 76, 250, less than 250 years, which divided by 4, about 60 elections. So when you're trying to say something with absolute certainty about a presidential election, understand that like an average, a 2% difference is perfectly within the realm of something happening versus not. And the same is true with NBA playoffs. So I think you took it as a very level-headed part on Dave Barry's article about the panic. You were like, you kind of just did the, shrug your shoulders and go, they were the favorites. They're now maybe not the favorites, but they're behind the Houston Rockets, but they're still a very good team. And I'm not going to be too worried about the playoffs. But the more important lesson I'd say both from Dave's piece and just history is anything can happen in the playoffs. Normally the better team wins out, but it's not outside the realm of possibility for, say, a number 7 seed Utah Jazz making it all the way to the finals. It's not outside of any reasonable error bars you could put around the NBA playoffs, especially using, loath to say it, Bayesian statistics, saying things we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and to give a little sneak preview, Patrick's working on a piece to update how his portfolio is doing that he bet at the beginning of the year. And one of the things that he's, going to say in there is that he's really happy now with his bet of the field versus Golden State. And that's looking pretty good now, right? Now that they're not even the favorites anymore. But to your point about, what I thought about this is, okay, so first of all, it's the word panic in the title, right? And who knows if Dave Barry even picked that word himself, right? Maybe the editor did, who knows? But so let's look at that word panic, right? So if we think that previously as the favorite, Golden State had a less than 50% chance of winning, what is losing that theorized, 3 or 4 points over par from Curry? What would that reduce their chances by? 5%, 10%? I don't know, maybe more. I'm just guessing, right? I haven't crunched the numbers, but is that reduction of panic? So, we'll see. That's kind of my thoughts on that. But you're right. I did love his framing of the playoff matchups based on SRS. That was one of my favorite parts of the article. And to answer your question about like who would I want Golden State to play as a Warriors fan based on SRS, well, yeah, a lot of these teams are close right now in record and SRS, but let's look at the trend for them. Utah Jazz, who you mentioned is the highest out of all these teams that aren't number 1 and 2, they also were without Gobert for a lot of this season. So yeah. I would expect their actual SRS with Gobert to be higher than that. So I'm afraid of them. You mentioned Portland as well, and Patrick will also talk about them in his article. Damian Lillard, I mean, maybe I've just been missing this, but it seems like he's kind of quietly become a major star this season and improved a lot from previous years. And they're giving Ed Davis a lot of run. He's became a legit star too, so they're a little bit scary.
It's funny, last season they kind of had a step back, and what was fascinating is there were 2 players, and I want to look at them this season really quick. We're talking about the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah.
I've never, you and I have had back and forth on the Portland Trailblazers about Damian Lillard, and I basically said early in his career, he hit 10 wins produced in a season, which is my definition of a star, so I'm never going to feel bad about paying him. He's having a great season. One of the nice things about Damian Lillard, and I believe he's doing it this season, is taking lots of threes. I mean,
oh yeah.
That's one of the things is it's a fascinating Moneyballish thing that teams should start looking at is players that are actually good at the threes that don't take as many of them as you would expect. And so Damian Lillard was, I was always looking at him. I was kind of going, we've seen him touch that star ceiling. He's a young player. He's got the skills that can be great. I was never worried about his contract at all. And to your point, yeah, his real issue is that he plays in an era of Steph Curry and James Harden and Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. Like he is legitimately a star point guard, and in many seasons would be a top 3-point guard in the league. But I would maybe say he's like the 6th or 7th best guard. I'll take a look at the players tab at Boxscore Geeks to see where he ranks among point guards. He's great. Ed Davis, so here's what happened. If you look at Ed Davis and Al-Farouq Aminu's seasons a few years ago, they basically looked, they looked pretty bad last season, despite the fact that they looked good this season before, which was really baffling and confused like one of our projections, which is, we expect young players to kind of stay good. And so Ed Davis, and I lied, Al-Farouq Aminu was fine. He just had a reduction in minutes. So Al-Farouq Aminu lost 600 minutes between 2016 and 2017. That hurt him last season. And Ed Davis went from being a great player to being average last season. So basically, Ed Davis came back. Damian Lillard followed the age curve fine. Al-Farouq Aminu stayed fine. And so as a result, this team has done really well.
And putting their numbers up, Dre, here's one thing I didn't catch earlier when I was looking at this. CJ McCollum, who we generally don't like, who's not a very good all-around player really, has picked it up this season and I think who's really taking over that Klay Thompson role that you like. And here's what I mean by that. He's not doing all the good wins produce things, but he is an over 40% three-point shooter.
Although, to be fair, he's a 54.7 true shooting player, and that's below average.
Oh, sure. He's not perfect at all, but he's become an average player in an important role, and that's good for them.
I mean, to be fair, if you look at Spotrac about CJ McCollum,
he is really overpaid. That's a debacle.
So the good news for him is he followed the age curve at least to become an average player and can shoot threes, but he's taking bad shots, and it's one of those things. I can't fault him. If you look at his last 3 seasons, his shots have remained utterly consistent in attempts, which means he just knows I'm going to take my shots. I'm never going to defer. And I can't fault him.
He's not hurting them as much as he has in the past, even though he has a bad contract, is all my point. But yeah, would they be a better team without him? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's be careful on that. Because as you noted, he's an average player. I think he is an example of a misallocated resource, both in terms of pay, and then I would also go in terms of shots. One of the annoying kind of straw man arguments I keep running into, and the reason Donovan Mitchell is on my brain is very simply a function of my Twitter feed. A lot of Utah Jazz fans keep talking to me about him, and like SLC Dunk, which I think is either the Sports Illustrated blog or the True Hoop blog. So this is a funny back and forth this week, Brian.
SLC Dunk is SB Nation, I think.
SB Nation. I got it completely wrong. I'm glad. This is why you're here, Brian.
Yep. Okay.
So, obviously, I have become somewhat notorious as a Donovan Mitchell hater. Heck yeah. Which is, we've argued I'm not necessarily a hater. I just don't think he's a productive player.
You like Donovan Mitchell. You don't like his stands, though.
I don't like his stats. I don't like his stats, and I don't like his stands. I don't like his stance. I love it. Okay. But so with Donovan Mitchell, somebody came at me and was like, look at Donovan Mitchell versus Victor Oladipo or DeMar DeRozan or Damian Lillard, blah, 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 blah. And so I went and filled in the blanks, and I said, well, Damian Lillard's a 60% true shooter, and I think DeMar DeRozan's like a 56% true shooter, and I think it's like 56, 58, 60, I think was those three at some point this season. And I pointed that out, and I said, and Donovan Mitchell's he's like exactly 54% right now, by the way. He's a 54% true shooter. I said those three players are on the, they're on the right side of average, right? So you have if you have a bell curve, they're on the right side of the bell curve. Donovan Mitchell is on the left side of the bell curve. And I said, well, that's the difference. And so SLC Dunk said, look at these comparisons these Donovan Mitchell fans will make to hate, he's a rookie. And by the way, that argument is really getting thin. Cut him some flack. He's a rookie. I'm going to preemptively give out one of my shout outs. So I've got 3 shout outs today from Twitter, and this is from Mick Stewart. And so Mick Stewart managed to essentially crystallize my Donovan Mitchell, how my actually I got the link wrong. Apologies, Brian. I copied the wrong link twice, if that makes sense. So I have another Twitter link that I copied, but Mick Stewart said something to the effect of, people will say Donovan Mitchell is amazing. And I say his efficiencies is below average. He's not amazing. And they'll say he's amazing for a rookie. And I'll say, well, yeah, maybe he'll become a good player, but he's not yet. And then they'll say you're a Donovan Mitchell hater. So that's really the crystallization of that back and forth with me and Donovan Mitchell. So obviously the he's a rookie argument is really wearing thin. I don't know if you're aware, like there are various tournaments and lots of sports and activities where you have an under. So, for instance, like this tournament is restricted to under 18 players. There a lot of like Euro players, you'll see that like they're in the FIBA U18 tournament. The NBA is an open field. So like it's an open. That means all ages.
Which means there are like Masters Leagues players too for retired NBA players, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, but no, that's the point. The NBA is an open field. It's rookies against everybody else. And what also I'll note is a lot of people have brought up Donovan Mitchell versus Michael Jordan. And here's what I'm going to say. Michael Jordan is a rookie. You never had to defend any of his stats as for a rookie. If anything, the for a rookie was a exclamation point, holy cow. So I never had to say, man, Michael Jordan's 59% true shooting is below average, but he's a rookie. You have to do that with Donovan Mitchell. Okay, so that's one argument. And so to get back to the original point, the argument you just made about CJ McCollum, another straw man argument I've seen people make is, well, take Donovan Mitchell off that team and they're worse. And here is one bit of credit I can give that team. The beginning of the year, the Utah Jazz did have Thabo Sefolosha, who is a player we have loved. We've thought he's underrated. We have been shocked by how bounced around he's been. It was funny. The Chicago Bulls, the year Derrick Rose won his MVP, they were almost an amazing team of just underrated talent. They had Robin Lopez and Thabo Sefolosha and Kyle Korver. I think one other player I'm forgetting. I don't think they had Jimmy Butler that year, but the Chicago Bulls have had a lot of underrated players that turned great. And Thabo Sefolosha is one that we've liked, and he has had some bad luck. He was on a 60-win Atlanta Hawks team and got his knees broken by the police and didn't play in the playoffs as a result. He was looking really good early in the season. And so you could kind of put Donovan Mitchell maybe in like an Emmanuel Mudiay spot where he really shouldn't have been getting played, but just happened to by happenstance. So the reason I want to bring that up is I think it's foolish to say this player is valuable because if you took them off the team would be worse, because for most teams, this has been one of our arguments we've had. It is silly to look at the replace that player with nothing or replace that player with, in the stupid baseball terms, replacement player level, the replacement level player. Because in theory, any NBA squad should be able to get an above average player or at least close to average player at each position for close to league average, right? Yeah, and we saw this offseason. Jeff Teague, George Hill, maybe you could argue Jimmy Butler. I think one or two other point guards were available this offseason if you wanted them. And lo and behold, the Utah Jazz actually did acquire Ricky Rubio in trade. You could probably have acquired an average shooting guard for that team. The reason we'll give them a little credit is they had one and that player got injured for the season. So, but that being said, when people are like, well, this team would be worse without this player, I'm like, poor team construction is not my fault and is a weird way of making a player valuable. So to CJ McCollum and Donovan Mitchell, I'll argue both of these players, CJ McCollum's about average, Donovan Mitchell's below average. Both of these players are an example of a team misspending their either one of three things: money, minutes played, or shots. And in Donovan Mitchell's case, only two, because he's on a rookie contract, so that's nothing. But that doesn't, to me, always bristles me the wrong way on making a player valuable. And like the same was true of Allen Iverson back in the day. They had a really good team constructed about him, but not a lot of scorers. And they're like, well, you need Allen Iverson on a team. It's like, no, you don't need Allen Iverson on that team. You need a few players that can shoot on that team. And they did not grab those players. So that does not make Allen Iverson valuable. That makes the front office ineffective, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that's a good distinction. Like with McCollum, for instance, are you going to – he's an average player that shoots 41% from three. Are you going to bench him in the playoffs or something? No, of course not. But for next season, you should try to trade him in the offseason to get rid of that contract.
All I would say about CJ McCollum is – and those are the more annoying players. And we kind of talked Al Horford in the same boat with the Celtics. The annoying players are the ones that help their team but are mispriced, because that is where –
exactly.
And Kobe Bryant, for the record, until Kobe Bryant's last contract, Kobe Bryant was really – and I wouldn't even argue price Bryant. I would just say Kobe Bryant was an example of a player that took too many shots. That was really our only argument, or took too many bad shots. That was really it. And that makes it really hard, because if people go, well, is he overpaid? And like I said, until his last contract, that he probably wasn't. You could go, no, he's probably – we might argue he's just value, right? Like you're paying the sticker price that we'd want to pay for him, but no, he's not really overpaid. Maybe marginally, but it's with it. I use that term air bars. Yeah, he's probably within the air bars. Yeah, he's not overpaid. There goes, is he a bad player? Like, no, he's not a bad player. Like, is he hurting a team?
But if he had modeled his game after Scottie Pippen instead of Michael Jordan, he would have had a better career.
Yeah. So, well, and that's in terms of our opinion. So, and the same thing is true of CJ McCollum. He's not hurting his team, really. He's an average player. You couldn't replace him with a replacement level player, someone off the bench, probably on that team. I haven't looked close in depth. We're just going to say he's overpaid, which when we're arguing playoff teams, that is such a boring economist thing to do that I that's actually one where I give it to the mainstream fans rolling their eyes at us. They're like, who gives a damn? His team is giving him twice as much money as he should be getting paid. You're like, yeah, you got a point.
That's true. And well, just to finish up on my point on the Warriors and SRS and playoff matchups, and you mentioned Minnesota. Them and the Pelicans are the two teams I'd want to face, right? Because they're probably weaker than their SRS due to not having Cousins or Jimmy Butler due to injuries.
Well, so Cousins is interesting because I would argue. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at these teams. Homework from Brian, real-time homework from Brian.
Well, it was meant to be a statement, but we can look into it.
Okay, so here's the bad news. This is kind of interesting. Nikola Mirotic has not played well. So here's what happened. We actually thought this hurt us a little. Not really, though, actually, because I did write an article where I said I thought Cousins to the Pelicans was a good move. So actually, I shouldn't say it hurt us. It makes me happy because it turned out what I wanted.
He also played a little bit better than usual this year.
Well, but to that point, that was our argument, is we basically said, okay, DeMarcus Cousins has an amazing ceiling. There are lots of players like this. He has an amazing ceiling. We've seen it. But we don't want to risk a ton of money on him because a lot of players are who they are. So the reason we loved him to the Pelicans, it's a 1.5-year deal, which is totally fine. It's helping a playoff push, right? So, basically that's the funny argument, is that if you think a player is going to get you over the hump into the playoffs and you're going to make a couple $1 million in the playoffs just on ticket sales, go for it. So we loved it. And then we also said, it's always hard to judge players. Like Sacramento, it's such a cluster of a location. And I actually I didn't have this on the shout out, but I do want to give this. Vivek Ranadive.
Yes.
Grabbed the mic and basically, as one of the few owners, I'm so happy he did this. The NBA seems a better place for us. Actually did give his sympathies to the protesters in terms of police brutality, police shooting, whatever you want to call it. Like it's so frustrating.
Well, so Dre, what was the specific situation here? Was it that the Kings had a game on the day of the Washington, D.C. protest on the 24th, and their stadium was being protested as part of that? Is that what happened?
Yes. And so I actually trying to get an article.
And they were barring fans from entering the stadium to watch the game. And that's when Ranadive gave his speech.
And so basically, he actually came out and said, we at the Kings recognize your people's ability to protest peacefully, and we respect that. He called Clark's death a horrific, I'm reading obviously, horrific tragedy in our community. And
just to say, Clark is the guy who was shot in Sacramento recently. This is a recent gun death.
Which is obnoxious. And I don't know if I have much in me to talk shooting, Brian.
Yeah, me either.
I'm gonna leave, but thank goodness. So we'll give Vivek Ranadive that point, the fact that he came out, and so it's a funny one where I think in terms of being a basketball team, in terms of trying to make a winning squad, the Kings ownership before Vivek Ranadive, and then impressively Vivek made it worse, which it's kind of an interesting, like, give him credit. Like I would have thought it was the Maloofs, right? Were the owners before?
The Maloofs, yeah, they're casino guys, I think.
I gotta give him credit for running the Kings worse than the Maloofs. Like that's something.
The Maloofs made some decent runs, but yeah, most of their era didn't do very well.
As an ownership group, I think Leslie Alexander of the Rockets, I think we liked too. It seemed like good stuff. I hope, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But obviously there's been weirdness coming out in the Mavericks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers are run by Dan Gilbert, who if you watch all of the housing crisis movies, Quicken Loans, he's part of it. So it's funny where in sports we can get very upset. I get in huge arguments online with people because we disagree about Donovan Mitchell, where the same people that I'm probably yelling at the top of my lungs with back and forth about Donovan Mitchell are people that like didn't vote for Trump, and we'd probably agree with 99% of things outside of sports. So to the same point about the Kings, I want to give that shout out because I'm like, the Kings are such a horribly run organization, and so that was my point about DeMarcus Cousins. Maybe a change of scenery, maybe playing next to some of his University of Kentucky, right? That's Anthony Davis. They both went to Kentucky.
Correct.
Okay, I'm glad you're always here to keep me honest on college sports because I don't know what to talk about. Maybe a change of scenery would do him good, and it did. So that was fine. Now, he got injured. They picked up Nikola Mirotic, who was playing great in Chicago, and we thought maybe this is going to help. That does not seem to be the case. So I'm actually going to give that to you. The New Orleans Pelicans, kind of, to your point, Brian, are not a bad opponent to hope for as the Golden State Warriors. Because,
and of course, the Spurs with Kawhi Leonard are bad, too.
Well, you don't want the Spurs with Kawhi, obviously, but it looks like they're not going to have them. So the Spurs without Kawhi definitely look favorable. The Pelicans, I mean, they do have, so the players they have, Anthony Davis, Drew Holiday, Rajon Rondo, very good. Cheikh Diallo and E'Twaun Moore are both good, but I think the problem is if we look at minutes played, I'm assuming that at least based on per minute per game, right, that Nikola Mirotic's getting a decent amount of play. Darius Miller has gotten a huge number of minutes. I don't know. Ian Clark's gotten a lot. I don't know how many of these are still on the team because there are obviously trades to make like Mirotic happen.
Yeah, but if I just scroll down here a little, they've had a lot of guys on this roster this season.
So essentially the Pelicans have some holes, which is good news for you, but they do have Anthony Davis, who is one of the best players in the NBA.
Yes.
And so it's a funny trade-off where it's kind of like, would you rather have the Pelicans or the Spurs? The Spurs don't really have a star without Kawhi, but they're a much more even-keel team versus the Pelicans, where the Pelicans have, Anthony Davis I could see Anthony Davis. I throw on my prognostication, my crazy, the ESPN crazy predictions that will never come true but are fun to say because if they do, I'll repeat it over and over and over again. He could get multiple triple doubles, multiple quadruple doubles in the playoffs. I'm going to say it right now.
Here's the surprising one for me to close out on the Pelicans. When I saw Emeka Okafor sign there, I think he's been out of the league for a few years. I was like, whatever, and didn't even click on the link. But in 305 minutes, he's played like a star. Who knows if he can keep that up, but yeah, he's rebounding great. He's blocking a ton of shots. Let's look at his shooting here. I just kind of saw this. He's been shooting okay. Yeah, I mean, I was not expecting that.
No, okay, I'll agree with you. So yeah, that's all we're saying about the Golden State Warriors. I think we've talked enough. Now there is a team I want to talk that's interesting, and it also relates. I think that the subject you put specifically is Fultz is back.
Yes.
We're going to talk the Philadelphia 76ers, and the reason I want to talk them is something fascinating. So first note, Markelle Fultz came back and did actually help, so that is true. Did help the 76ers beat my Nuggets. They keep toying with my heart. I think as we're recording the show, okay, it does look like it's over, Brian. So the Denver Nuggets actually did give the Toronto Raptors a run. It was tied at halftime, and it looked like the Nuggets were actually up. So I'll be impressed to see how they blew the game. But Nikola Jokic played a fantastic game. Actually played 38 minutes. But the Denver Nuggets are going to lose to the Toronto Raptors. By the way, in only 13 minutes of play, Trey Lyles 5 for 6 for 13 points, 5 rebounds. But it's a hard one. I can't actually fault. Paul Millsap played well too. I'll have to look over this game. It looks like our backcourt is actually what hurt us. Will Barton, Jamal Murray, and Wilson Chandler all had more shots than points. So the Nuggets are interestingly having too many good bigs on the squad right now. Millsap's actually playing quite well right now, which is frustrating for those of us who have been bashing him. But the Denver Nuggets just got blown out by the 76ers, and Markelle Fultz came back and actually played well, kind of, because he had, I think he had high rebounds and high assists, but his shooting was really bad.
Well, so he only played 14 minutes, and he had 8 assists in 14 minutes, which is interesting to me. But he didn't have a ton of rebounds, and he shot 5 for 13. So
I crunched the numbers, and it was an above-average game.
Yeah.
But so that being said, excluding him, of course, I don't know how much he should play in the playoffs, honestly. If you go look at these 76ers and sort them by minutes played, and I can't find them quick enough to keep talking, Brian, but we'll try and keep stalling. But if you sort the 76ers by minutes played, essentially they don't have any weaknesses. Ben Simmons is their top guy. has a wins per 48 of .268 now that we have him properly listed as a point guard for almost 14 wins as a rookie. This is such a ridiculous rookie season. He deserves Rookie of the Year, and it bugs me that anybody thinks it's close. Robert Covington, the guy we argued back and forth on, he's worth the money, has almost gotten about 6 wins and is an above-average player. Dario Saric, almost perfectly average for a big, almost 5 wins. We'll get some flack for this. Joel Embiid, an above-average player, almost 5 wins. He hasn't played full time. And I believe I was looking at this. I should actually do a chart of his uptick because I believe the last month he's improved in production. I think it was a little rusty to start, so I think he's gotten better. J.J. Redick, average. T.J. McConnell, very good. Amir Johnson, very good. It's not until they get to Jerry D. Bayless is what I always call him. But
Jerry D. I love it.
It's not until they get down to Jareed Bayless, which, from the Arturo perspective of the playoff rotation, their top 7 players are all above average with, importantly, Ben Simmons as a star and Joel Embiid as a above average player when you factor in defense, probably really good, I'm going to argue this is the funny thing, might do the Marcus Camby. The real reason this is frustrating and hard to see with your eyes. The real problem about Joel Embiid has in his entire, very limited, still under 100 NBA games, I believe, career, it's his turnovers. And that's hard to see because he basically averages, according to the numbers, I just lost them. Cool. Weird.
Are you looking for his per 48 turnovers?
Yeah, he's averaged, last season he averaged 7.1 turnovers per 48. And this season he's averaged about 6 per 48. Now here's what's important about that. Per 48, let's break that down. That's about 1 turnover a quarter if you're looking at his minutes per game. That is incredibly hard to see. But if you think about an NBA game where the point margin is plus 3 points, the top teams we're talking about are, an SRS of 7. So that's plus 7 points in a 100 possession game. The math, the arithmetic basically breaks down to a possession is worth roughly a point in the NBA. That's what all of Dave Barry's regressions on NBA box scores have said. So if you think about that, a turnover a quarter is worth roughly 1 point a quarter. So that's almost a -4 swing. Now, of course, he does lots of other stuff to make up for it. The average big in the same amount of time as Joel Embiid has been about 2.6 turnovers per 48. He's at 5.9 this season. So that's 3.3 per 48. Let's break that into, that's basically about half a quarter. He's giving up about 2 points compared to average versus a normal big. If he gets that even halved, right? If he gets down to, instead of being 6, if he gets down to 4 turnovers a game, he ups himself from being a good player to a star player in our eyes. And I know that's rough. I mean, I know that's going to make people upset because they're going to say he's a star. Can you see all the stuff he does? He rebounds, he blocks, he scores really well. He is really efficient, 57.4% true shooting. And it's a hard one. Like that's what's always been rough. Now, what I will say, by the way, for fans of other mainstream analytics sites like 538, a few years ago, one of our favorite authors, although we didn't agree with this post, so one of our favorite authors, Ben Morris, came out with a post about how like a steal was like 8 times more valuable than a rebound or something. We were like, that's an interesting take. But the point being, steals and turnovers are really bad, or good, respectively. A steal's really good, a turnover's really bad.
Yeah.
And it's hard to notice. I mean, I'm gonna throw another one of my shout outs away. So what I noted, I said that the biggest difference between the NBA advanced statistics community and basketball was that in baseball, you would never say a 2,900 hitter is about as good as a 320 hitter.
This is my favorite tweet of yours in a while. I have it up.
I'm doing a lot of money. I one of the things I do, this is hilariously sad to me, Brian. I was watching some Moneyball clips, the movie, on YouTube, and they really do perk me up, kind of. But it occurs to me that movie came out 7 years ago. The book the movie was based off came out like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here going, this movie based on a book, the stuff he's saying is poetry, and it's based off a book that's 15 years old, and the stuff he is saying still hasn't caught on in the NBA, which is like, I'm like, dear God. But baseball is interesting in that regard. It's always interesting to compare how the advanced stats took off in baseball versus basketball. And I think the bigger difference is the Oakland A's wanted people to know what they were doing. I mean, they can say they didn't or what, but you got a freaking writer following you around for a year in your locker room. Like, you're not stupid. The San Antonio Spurs would never let you do that. That's the difference. The teams that know what they're doing in the NBA have no problem letting misinformation leak. The Spurs had no problem having people think that it was just Tim Duncan all this time. The Warriors and Rockets aren't going to go tell teams, hey, you need to take more threes like us, right? They have no reason to. So that's the big difference. But to that point, what makes basketball and other stats hard is these minor differences, and people don't notice them. So when I brought up shooting, that's what's fascinating, right? Donovan Mitchell is a 54% true shooting player. That is a huge difference between league average, which is 55.6 roughly. That's a 1.5% difference, and a huge difference between the good players who we're going to put, at 60% like Damian Lillard, or the great players like Steph Curry and Durant, who are going to be, 65% in their good years. That is a huge difference. But you have people that don't notice that a 5% difference in true shooting is huge, or that a 1 turnover a game difference is a huge thing, whereas that is the math behind sports. But back to the 76ers, that being said, so I'm saying if Embiid gets his turnovers under control just in this playoffs, that's a Marcus Camby-like transformation that turns this team into a contender. And unlike the other contenders, so here's what's interesting. The Warriors are really dinged up. And so we've talked about this before, where that's kind of a problem, especially in the realm of them sometimes playing small ball and playing players like Nick Young, or who's the guard that Draymond Green really likes now?
Who Draymond Green really likes. Well, their new guard they have is Quinn Cook. You might be thinking of him. He's been starting for Curry. And
it's possible that Omri Caspi gets cut for Quinn Cook, which could be interesting.
They might have to do it, but you know who I'd rather cut. Dre, you're gonna be mad at me for saying this, but lately I've kind of been in the same camp with Nick Young as with Klay Thompson and CJ McCollum. Like, he's not a very good player, but all their players are hurt, and he's shooting 40% on threes. So, what else are we gonna do?
Well, he sucks. I mean,
he does suck.
But yeah, so essentially, here's the thing: the Golden State Warriors are really beat up, and so who knows if they were healthy. So, for instance, if they were bringing their heavy hitters to the yard, that would be just reverse order. Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Stephen Curry, Andre Iguodala, Nick Young. You're killing me. I actually argue that they still have a weakness, because in terms of minutes played, their top 7 players: Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Andre Iguodala, Nick Young, Sean Livingston. Sean Livingston was a productive player, but has gotten old. They have a hole in their top 6/7 in that Nick Young, Sean Livingston. We've talked about the Rockets before, where they have a hole in that Eric Gordon is not very good. I believe, let's see, the Boston Celtics. Let's go over there real quick.
I should mention for the Warriors, though, it's a self-made hole. They have plenty of really good players, all their big men, Jordan Bell, et cetera, et cetera. Caspi, for instance, they could be playing instead.
So here's Looney. Yeah, they have Jordan Bell would be interesting if they got their head on straight and started giving Jordan Bell those minutes instead.
He's been hurt too lately.
Here's what I'll say about the Boston Celtics. Their top 6 are all pretty productive. Their issue actually breaks down to, and this was the same problem they had last year, they don't have a legitimate star. So if we're talking about contenders, this is teams we think could make the finals, and we're looking at the 76ers versus the other teams. The Toronto Raptors I'm looking at, they have Serge Ibaka, who's a below average player, who's their 3rd highest minutes. All of the contenders, let me just verify this really quick. So that's going to be the Rockets, the Warriors, the Raptors, the Celtics. I'll put the top 3 in each. So how about this? I'll be fair. I'll put the top 3 in each. The Raptors, the Celtics, the Cavaliers, the Rockets, the Warriors, and the Blazers. The Raptors are giving too much time to Serge Ibaka. The Boston Celtics don't have a star. Don't even get me started on all the holes in the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Houston Rockets have Eric Gordon.
Cavaliers have injury problems too.
Injury, of course, too. Golden State Warriors are just really beat up, and the Portland Trailblazers, I feel bad that I wasn't paying more attention when I was looking at them earlier. Nurkic and Evan Turner are kind of meh. So essentially, the 76ers are the only team that, if you look at them from top to bottom, that's number 1 to number 7, all of those players are above average, and they have a star, which for this playoffs could be huge, especially, like I said, Joel Embiid. I was arguing with some friends about this. I think we've seen his ceiling. I think we've seen what he could be. I still think he still makes mistakes, like with things like turnovers and fouls, but he's young. And so it's really with Embiid, it all comes down to health.
So on Embiid's fouls, Dre, let's see if I have this tab still up here.
He got those better this year than last year.
Yeah, so that I was just to illustrate your point. Last year he was 6.8, way, way high, and he was a below average player. Now he's an above average player, and he's reduced his fouls not quite down to average, but close to average. So the reduction in fouls has been big for him.
I do want to be fair to us, too. I don't know if you recall this article I wrote last season. I looked at Joel Embiid's last month, basically right before he went out injured again for the whole season. And he was a 2 wins per 48. And I want to do that again. I want to look at Joel Embiid's numbers post All-Star break because I think he's playing star level again. And so that's pretty much the point. It all comes down to health. And I think, I can't remember if we were saying this pre-show or if we said this on the show. The real depressing part about this to me is that despite all of my bashing of Sam Hinkie's plan, it's remarkable to me that it may actually turn out to have worked exactly as intended in the time spent. Because our major argument against Sam Hinkie's plan of the tank for 3 to 4 seasons, acquire, I think he required like 4 to 5 top 10 draft picks, hope that 2 of them turn into a star and go, while also picking, he picked up TJ McConnell, he picked up Robert Covington. He would have easily, bullshit, you don't think he could have easily spent that much money as well as JJ Redick and Amir Johnson. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if the reason he targeted those players was people from his old staff. So all that being said, well, what I'll say, I'll throw my hands up and say, I can't believe the plan might be coming to fruition in the time, because that was our main argument. It's like, this is going to take too long. This is a bad plan because you've already wasted 4 seasons. And if you don't manage to make it to the finals really quickly, this was a waste. They might make it to the finals really quick. And in fact, just looking over the numbers, just looking at the landscape of the playoffs and the fact that they're in the East, I think the Philadelphia 76ers have a great shot of making to the finals, and depending on the matchup, have a great shot of matching up well.
So before we move on, I've got the Celtics roster open right now. So the one guy who could be a star for them, who I think Arturo or some Celtics fan would push back on, is Kyrie Irving, who's really stepped it up this year and is almost at that 10-win point. However, he is hurt. So is he out for the whole playoffs, or will he play at all in the playoffs? That's my question.
That's true. With Steph Curry, that happened, right? When he slipped on that sweat and injured his ankle and then took a while to get back. It's like, you never know if a player that was playing star level comes back if they're going to be healthy, and you don't bet on it. And so
that's fair. But
that being said, I love Kyrie Irving. I said I regret the fact that I put him at the top of my overrated players going into the season. Although here's what I'm going to say, Brian. I was looking over this. Brad Stevens, if you look at players that leave the Celtics that are like role players, this is like Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley and Evan Turner. Evan Turner was a hilarious one. If there are players that are like role players, and I consider like scorers, Evan Turner was a scorer, right? I consider him a role player. They look a lot better on the Celtics than on other teams. So I think Brad Stevens is a very good. I'll actually say I think him or D'Antoni, one of them deserves Coach of the Year.
You're probably right, but I think Crowder is a bad example. Wasn't he better on the Mavericks?
He was about average on the Mavericks.
So he was better on the Celtics? Okay.
He was much better on the Celtics. Just like, but that's the funny thing.
NBA Twitter agrees with you. I think Brad Stevens is like the biggest darling of nerds right now. Him and Brett Brown. And
I'm just saying a lot of the players that have gone to the Celtics have looked better. I thought Al Horford, Al Horford versus Paul Millsap are interesting. Where I was like, these are very good players in their prime. They're past their prime. You shouldn't sign them. Al Horford's actually looked almost worth the money they're paying him on the Celtics. So it's like,
yeah.
Whatever's in the water, it might be Brad Stevens. I'll give him the likely credit. I'll tilt towards that. He's made a lot of players look good, but even with that, they don't compete firepower, right? They don't have a Ben Simmons. They don't have a James Harden or Chris Paul. They don't have an Anthony Davis or LeBron James. So I think
he's been there at least like 5 years, right? He's been there for a while now. There's probably enough data to run those coaches wrong numbers again and see how he looks.
Well, I think he plays the right players, and the Dave Barry one is just how players production. If you basically look at a player's age curve on various teams, how it looks on the Celtics versus other teams, and I think it does look pretty good there. Yeah. Let's see. We talked Fultz. We talked the 76ers. Donovan Mitchell. I think I got some of my thing out. It's just like I said, the Moneyball thing, Brian. It's depressing that this worked. I guess I'll put it that way, because it's not that I'm upset that people are expecting Donovan Mitchell to do great things. He's a young player. If he follows kind of a Kevin Durant-ish path, there's nothing to say he won't turn into a great player. but bullshit that people don't think he's a part of the Utah Jazz's success this season. And what I would argue is it's not his fault that he's in the situation he is in. So that's kind of what we're bashing him for. And I would do the exact same. If I was an NBA player based on all of the information I've read, that's Dave Barry's work, all the stuff on salary, etc., I would be taking 17 shots a game. I would be doing my damnedest to keep above 20 points per game. That being said, I know people are convinced that his scoring this season is a part of the Jazz's success, and the numbers just say it isn't. And I had really hoped we were past this. I had really hoped we were past the Allen Iverson on the Philadelphia 76ers days of this player scores 20 to 30 points a game, ergo they're valuable. Even Kobe Bryant was an above-average scorer relative to the NBA in his prime. And so Donovan Mitchell just kind of proves that that is still around. And I mean, for example, what was fascinating to me, a few games ago, the Utah Jazz, who were the favorites against the San Antonio Spurs, lost a 1-point game in overtime to the San Antonio Spurs. Our numbers say that Donovan Mitchell was terrible. Donovan Mitchell took 36 shots, and in those 36 shots, scored 35 points. And of course, not only did he take 36 shots, he also took 4 free throws. So he was a significantly below average scorer. Not only that, it wasn't until the end of the fourth quarter when he took 4 consecutive shots that went in, including 2 threes, that helped push the game to overtime. So essentially, he had to play his mind out, and that was the only time. The end of the fourth quarter is when he got his shots below his points, which is that's a very simple metric in the NBA. You want your points to be greater than your shots. That's not a hard metric. It wasn't until the end of the fourth with 4 in a row shots that got him above that mark, and then in overtime, which they lost, he missed 4 consecutive shots. Like I said, the net effect was he below average. Of course, though, the articles are going to say Donovan Mitchell was clutch. Donovan Mitchell did his damnedest. His 3 points were huge. And the reality is, had Donovan Mitchell even shot as well as Donovan Mitchell normally shoots during the regular NBA season, or even as well as, because the San Antonio Spurs are an above average defensive team, or even shot as well as the average team does against the San Antonio Spurs, they would have won that game in regulation, and they were the favorites to win based on SRS. So it bugs me that the same stuff still works, and that's really it. I mean, I think I've got some articles I want to write on Donovan Mitchell. I've just, 2 weekends ago I had taxes. This last weekend my family was in town. We'll see if I ever get.
Oh, did you finish taxes, Trey? Good work.
That was 2. We were talking about that. That was 2 weeks ago. Like, our show didn't go out on time, and that was wise because I got into the taxes. I made the joke. It's not really a joke. It's not even that funny, but I said, like, taxes are a tax on the self-employed because of how much time they take out of us. But that being said, on Donovan Mitchell, it's just, that's kind of it. It's we've kind of said we're the Get Off Our Lawn podcast, and I've mentioned that I kind of get tired at where advanced stats is, and Donovan Mitchell just kind of crystallizes this, because I was like, I thought we were past this. I thought a significantly below average player taking a lot of shots, it would at least be easy enough to say they're not. Now, that being said, I'll give my last. This just makes it easy, Brian. I'm not even going to do my shout outs at shout out time. I'm going to shout out. Did I have these in the wrong order? This is very annoying.
Good thing, Dre, because we got 2 minutes if we want to get in under an hour.
Okay, so anyway, I'm going to give it to Aaron Almiroth. So Aaron Almiroth did what I love. He did the player A versus player B comparison. I knew who they were ahead of time, so this was funny. Player A is Donovan Mitchell. Player B is Ben Simmons. He said, "Who you got?" And I loved it. And then I even tweeted at SLC Dunk to say, "Hey, do you want to yell at him for being mean to your boy?" And he said, "Bring it on." So Aaron Almiroth, thank you so much. I'm glad to find people out you. Of course, Aaron Almiroth has like 400 followers. SLC Dunk has like 12,000. So
I will follow Aaron right now. You convinced me.
It's what it is. The Nuggets are just depressing to me. I got nothing. I wish they were so close to the playoffs. And the game against the 76ers, I want to be mad at something, but they just got outplayed. So I got nothing. I'll let you make the last point. You said weird for the NBA to go in this direction of subscription age. And the NBA lets some fans stream a live game finals for, let's see, you said for 99 cents.
Yeah. I just had some business stuff here at the end. I always like to look at that. So apparently the NBA just started letting fans stream the final quarter of games from 99 cents as an experiment. kind of seems to go against subscription models that are more popular lately. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes.
Well, because I mean, what I kind of view this as is if you look at price point, right, like a song or whatever, I think sometimes the annoying part about an NBA game or a Major League Baseball game, and NBA has done a fantastic job shortening their games, which I like this season with like some of the foul stuff. But like a Major League Baseball game, if I want to go to a baseball game, it's like 4 hours, and that's excluding drive time. And that's just so much time to think. And even if I like sports, it's like if there's a close game, I might just want to turn it on and see what it's going on. I would pay $1. This is fantastic.
No, I agree. And that's why it's funny to me, because that is a meme, right? That, oh, NBA games, if you just watch the last 5 minutes, that's all you need to watch. You don't need to watch the rest of the game. Well, I don't think the league would want to be embracing that meme, but like you said, it's probably a really good product.
Well, I mean, it also, what's funny is you could view kind of like two separate types of fans. You're going to have the fans that are going to want the full game and will sign up for League Pass. So for those fans, make League Pass a better product. That's fucking step one.
And like with gambling, for instance, the NBA was leading the way on that versus the other big leagues, knowing their fans like to gamble. So now everyone else is following suit.
But now you have the second fans, which are people that weren't going to pay for League Pass, that don't have a cable package, that are going to watch the whole game. That might be like, I'll put myself. I'm actually in this category now, like the bar fan, where like if I'm interested in a game, I might find an excuse to go to a bar nearby and just watch it. This is fantastic for that fan. So I think you were talking about the same thing where what was it? It was not Twitch, Snapchat or something, like they were getting a bunch of viewers on Snapchat or something. And
the ESPN version of SportsCenter they're making for Snapchat with Katie Nolan and someone else doing that. Apparently is doing really well.
I call this like found money. It's like you are looking for fans that weren't going to pay for the product anyway. And then this is also a fantastic way to upsell, because let's say you find someone that buys, like you're saying, right? This is how they sell tickets. Same way. Someone buys 4 final quarters. You say, hey, do you want to subscribe to the NBA fourth quarter subscription, right? You can look at 10 fourth quarter games a month, or unlimited fourth quarter games a month for this much. And they sign up for that, and they say, hey, by the way, you signed up for this. Do you want to sign up for NBA League Pass this much, and small upsell? I love it. That was actually at Sloan, one of the more interesting talks and one of the more creepy talks was the Philadelphia 76ers. Their front office, they actually do a lot of analytics for measuring season ticket holders. Ooh. And like if they don't show up for the games multiple times, how soon you should call someone because you're worried you're going to lose them for retention. And if they show up at the game, how often you want to interact with them to make them feel, like a special person at the game. So lots of stuff like that. So I think you can use this. I think this is good for the model, if not potentially creepy. All right. So Brian, I'm going to call that technically about an hour for the show, though. And I cheated it in my shout outs. So my shout outs, for those of you that didn't know, actually, let's give the last one was to Brandon Anderson, who on that tweet that I noticed about the difference, he just said, this was a very astute observation, which I liked. He said, in baseball, that difference in the hitter, this was a point that came up in Wages of Wins, the difference between a 2,900 hitter and a 320 hitter is 3 hits per 100 at bat. So that's going to take you multiple games to notice, right? One, there's like the famous Bull Durham quote about that, like you just want 1 extra hit per like 10 at games to do this. So that difference is very minute and hard to notice at the game level. Whereas the 3% difference in true shooting percentage, like I was just saying about Donovan Mitchell, all you have to do is say, if Donovan Mitchell had shot his league average or his season average or league average or average against the Spurs that game, they would have won. It matters in the single game, and the difference is because, right, in a baseball game, a player only gets 5 at-bats, whereas in a basketball game, they actually get many, many possessions. So it's fascinating. And, the funny thing I'll say, Brian, I think it's I think Brandon Anderson said, or someone else said, I forget who on Twitter, notice the decimal point difference. And I think that's the problem. Baseball has always been out to 3 decimal points because we used to do field goal percentage and free throw percentage pre-free throw line. The NBA has always been 2 decimal points, and I think people miss that subtle difference.
That's it. Brandon Anderson's point is so subtle that when I first skimmed the tweet, I thought he was criticizing your point, but now it's clear you're right. He's agreeing with you. So, yeah, that's a very subtle point.
All right, so those are all of my shout-outs. So Brandon Anderson, Aaron Almaroth, and Mick Stewart for their tweets to me this week. Thanks so much for that, guys. And then I'll let you get your shout-outs, Brian, and that'll be the show.
Yeah, just 2 more kind of businessy shout-outs. One is to Michelle Roberts, who we've talked about a lot here, the head of the NBA Players Association, who helped negotiate that new Better for the Players CBA. Chris Paul shouted her out on Twitter for winning the Forbes Most Powerful Woman in U.S. Sports 2018. I know Forbes gives out 1 million awards, but hey, good job, Michelle Roberts. And the last one is to American all-time great swimmer Katie Ledecky, who just turned pro. And Dan Wetzel writes a scathing, indictment of the NCAA. Like, why would everyone, the Olympics, the World Championships, everyone wants Katie Ledecky to swim for them except the NCAA, and the folly of their white-knuckle grip on amateurism that he references. So anyway, yes, good job, Katie Ledecky, screwing the NCAA.
Yeah, we're not fans of the NCAA around here. And how old? She's like freaking young, right?
She was a sophomore at Stanford. So she's foregoing her final 2 years of eligibility to turn pro.
And I mean, it's
and she's already got 5 Olympic gold medals.
It's funny, yeah. I mean, it's up there with other. There are topics that on this show, like, we've talked them before. They come up, and it's just like, I don't have it in me to talk the NCAA right now, especially on a show we were trying to keep.
Yeah, I just try to do the brief mentions because, unlike Donovan Mitchell and some of this other crap, I think the mainstream is on our side on this one finally. So I think we might have almost reached a tipping point here. So.
The last point, that just to sum up that Donovan Mitchell, the one thing I'll give, the thing that does make me freaking happy as hell, though, is the Houston Rockets. And the Houston Rockets and Philadelphia 76ers, because admittedly, the 76ers, we did not agree with the tanking model, but we agreed with their drafting plan and shedding bad contracts. So it's I get to be that obnoxious, you know how like Trump, when he'd lose promoting someone in election, he's like, well, actually, though, but I will say, to be fair, Patrick and I did go up to Sam Hinkie when he was GM of the 76ers. We did say we were big fans. We did compliment their draft picks. We did compliment a lot of their moves, and just eventually said, you have to do something. That was our plan. And we might be wrong. They ended up with Ben Simmons, so is what it is. I will say that if the teams that we think have the best shot at winning a title this year, I'm putting my money on the 76ers are a fantastic bet. I think Warriors, Rockets, 76ers are the top 3, in my opinion, based on looking at all the other teams, looking at strength top to bottom, what they have. You need a star, you need a good top 6. I think that they're in the best boat.
I'll still take Toronto over the 76ers. Their body of work is way too good, but
okay, so
I could easily see that happening.
For the show, Brian and I are going to have to do some form of bet. Maybe a Wisconsin, maybe like cheese curds versus.
Oh wow!
Does Silicon Valley actually produce anything of value?
Just the only good thing we produce where I live is beer, pretty much. Just beer.
Yeah, maybe some beer. We could do
But you
beer.
don't really drink, so damn it.
My wife does.
We do make computers, though. I don't know if you like computers.
Well, yeah, you want to buy me a new Mac? But anyway, so if Toronto and the 76ers end up against each other in the playoffs, we'll have to have some kind of bet about who we think is going to win. But the teams that are at the top are the ones that are doing the things we like. So I guess there is some solace in that. Like, there is some victory in that. Arturo actually said that to me. He said, everybody's a dinosaur except the people that have actually caught on. So there are people that have caught on to metrics. It's just like, I would have hoped the mainstream would have caught on a little more.
No, let me just say my final thing on that is the NBA is just by far in the best place it's ever been in economics-wise, quality of play, just if you're talking about narratives and just who these players are and what their personalities are, like, everything about the NBA is so great right now. So we're just so lucky to get to talk about it during this period of time.
It's I feel bad quoting him, obviously, with where he is now, but it was a fantastic sketch or monologue was Louis C.K. and everything is amazing, but nobody's happy.
Yeah.
And before he gives is you fly in a plane. Think about how long it used to take to travel.
Yeah.
There are people on planes that'll complain about the bad Wi-Fi service on the plane. It's like you're in the air getting access to Wi-Fi and you're mad that it's spotty. So it's like the NBA. You're right, Brian. The NBA is so much stats-wise, play-wise, everything-wise.
Beautiful to watch, right?
So much better than it has ever been. You can watch it for $1. You can watch fourth quarters. I mean, heck yeah.
99 cents.
Yeah, Brian, you've got me back on board. Everything's great in the NBA. All right. Anyway, with that being said, that's been our show. We have been the Boxscore Geek Show. If you found us not through the website, you can find our tools and analysis at boxscoregeeks.com and my occasional writings at nerdnumbers.com. We go live every week on twitch.tv/nerdnumbers, usually around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays. If you missed the live show, you can catch the recap on channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube. I've been your host, Dre Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers Everywhere, co-host by Brian Foster. You can find as Boxscore Brian. I think I forgot something there. Oh, yeah, iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geeks Show. Subscribe, upvote, helps us out. That has been our show, and we will see you next time.